So, tonight's story is about an elephant called Bill.
Bill and Dumbo.
Well, there were two elephants. One was called Bill and one was called Dumbo.
Yeah.
And the one thing that elephants liked more than anything else, and especially Bill and Dumbo, are bananas. They love bananas. So every time Dumbo or Bill would find a banana tree, they'd pull the bananas off the tree and eat them. Well, one day they got to a banana tree, and can you guess who was climbing on the banana tree before them? It was some monkeys. And the monkeys didn't like the elephants being there because the monkeys wanted to eat bananas for themselves. But the elephants wanted the bananas for themselves. So Bill said to the monkeys, "Those are our bananas, we want to eat them." And Dumbo said yes to the monkeys. "You can't eat those monkeys, they're ours." But the monkeys went, "Chatter, chatter, chatter, no, they're our bananas." So they started to argue about whose bananas they were. The monkeys got very cross and started to pull the bananas off and throw them at Dumbo and Bill. And Dumbo and Bill said, "Stop, please stop throwing bananas, because if you keep throwing bananas at us, we'll have to let you eat have to let you have the banana tree all for yourselves." Well, of course, that just encouraged the monkeys even more. They threw more and more bananas at Bill and Dumbo. But do you know what Bill and Dumbo did as the bananas came flying at them? They would catch them in the trunk and pop them in their mouth. Now, after a while, the monkeys had thrown all the bananas at Bill and Dumbo, and there were no more bananas left on the banana tree. And Bill and Dumbo had eaten all the bananas. Then Bill and Dumbo looked at the monkeys and said, "You know what? You can have the banana tree." "Hooray!" said the monkeys, "we've won." Then they looked at the banana tree for the bananas, but there weren't any because they'd thrown them all at the elephants, and the two elephants had eaten them all. Now it was time for Bill and Dumbo to go to work. And the jobs that Bill and Dumbo had were pulling logs after the farmers or the woodcutters had cut the trees down. So they went to work pulling the lugs. It was a hard work. But when it was finished, the chief, the man who looked after the elephants, said to the elephants, "You've been very good elephant. You've done a hard day's work. Now you can go to the pond to wash." So he took the two elephants to the pond where the water was nice and cool and refreshing, and they both paddled into it, sucked up some water in their trunks, and squirted each other. It was such fun, and they enjoyed it. Then they lay down in the water and rolled around, splashing and laughing. And then one of the elephants, this was Dumbo in fact, sucked up some water into his trunk and squirted the man who tells them how to pull the trees. The owner was very cross. He shouted at the elephant. But Bill then did the same thing, sucked up some water in his trunk and squirted the owner. "Splash! I'm wet, shouted the owner. "I'm very cross with you." But the owner loved the elephants very much, so he wasn't too angry. He thought it was quite funny, but he was still cross a little bit. Then the owner took the two elephants back to where they're going to sleep for the night, in a nice clearing surrounded by some trees, and he brought them their dinner. And guess what they had for dinner?
I don't know.
Bananas, of course.
Oh,
Well, it's not just bananas elephants like. Every day they get something different. Some days they get apples. Some days they get leaves. They like lots of things, especially things which are soft and damp and crunchy, but not dry. They're like dry twigs, but they like nice, supple, bendy twigs which are still green. They're delicious. That's what elephants like. And Bill and Dumbo really liked being elephants because they could play together, and every day after they'd been working, they would go down to the pond with their master and squirt water at each other. And sometimes they'd squirt water at the master, and sometimes they'd be very naughty and squirt water at a passerby, or maybe a car which was driving down the road. Of course, they thought it was very funny. The people who got wet, well, they didn't like it very much. But, you know, an elephant's an elephant, and he doesn't have a brain like you, so he sometimes is a bit naughty. Would you be naughty if you were an elephant? I'm sure not.
No.
Then, one day, the elephants started to get quite old. And they were very tired, and it was quite hard to pull the logs. So the master put his arms round the neck of the elephant and said, "Dear elephant, if you can't pull the logs anymore, you're no use to me. I have to get rid of you." And the master was crying, and Bill and Dumbo were both crying, but there was nothing to do. The master took them to the elephants' old people's home. This is a place in the forest where the old elephants live until they die. They cried their eyes out because they so much enjoyed going to the pond every day. They so much enjoyed the fun they have with the monkeys fighting over the bananas. They so much enjoyed pulling the logs. But now they were too old to pull the logs. And the master cried, "Bye-bye, Dumbo, bye-bye, Bill." And Bill and Dumbo cried as the master walked away and left them there in the place where the old elephants live.
And they die.
That's what's going to happen. In the end, they will die, but it takes some time. So while they're there, they meet some other old elephants. And guess what? They make new friends. And guess what? There are other monkeys there and their banana trees. And they can have some fun with the other monkeys. And when they start to explore a little bit, they find there's also a nice pond where they can go in the water and splash and squirt water at each other. And actually, they lived a very nice and happy life in the new place, in the old people's home for elephants. And that's the end of the story of Bill and Dumbo.
I'm going to say sorry again. I'll tell it, but I can, okay?
Tell it again. You mean you like the story of Bill and Dumbo?
My head, okay?
Okay, from my head. Well, I'll do it very briefly. So Bill and Dumbo were two elephants whose job it was to pull the logs for their owner. But they also liked to have fun with the monkeys. So when they saw a banana tree, they would eat the bananas. But sometimes there were monkeys on the banana tree eating the bananas. So they'd get into an argument with the monkeys about whose banana tree it was, because the bananas, well, they belong to the banana tree, but the monkeys think they belong to the monkeys, and the elephants think it belongs to the elephants. So they'd argue. But always ended up the same way. The monkeys, they would say, "Stop throwing these bananas at us," to the monkeys. "If you keep throwing the bananas at us, we'll have to give you the banana tree." So the more they say it, the more the monkeys throw bananas at the elephants. And of course, the elephants like that because they can really eat the bananas when they get thrown to them. But they don't tell the monkeys that they're being tricked. And eventually the monkeys will have thrown all the bananas and there won't be any left on the tree. And then the elephants say, "Oh, you know what, we give up, you can have your banana tree." But of course there's no more bananas because the elephants have eaten it all. And then after they've done their day's work pulling the logs, the owner takes them down to the lake and they lie down in the water and splash and squirt. And sometimes they squirt the owner. He's very cross. No, he says, "Don't squirt me. I'm your owner. You're going to make me wet." But they squirt with their trunks. Of course, he's not that cross, but he's a bit cross because he doesn't like to get wet. And then sometimes they're even naughtier, these two elephants. Sometimes they squirt the passers-by. Or walking, or on motorbikes, or in their cars. Of course, the passers-by really don't like it because they're perhaps wearing nice clothes and perhaps they have a mobile phone on them which gets wet. They really don't like it. But the elephants laugh their heads off. It's great fun. But when the time comes that they're too old to pull the logs, the owner takes them into the forest and takes them to the place where the old elephants live and die eventually. It's like an old people's home, but it's an old elephant's home.
For a long time.
And the elephants go there.
For a long time.
But luckily, in the same place, there are banana trees.
But if an elephant stays there too long, that would die.
Eventually they die, yes.
And then you never see anybody again.
That's right, but they have a very long and happy life in the old people's home. They live happily ever after. The end.
Yes.